Welcome to We Muse Aloud, a new podcast featuring music, soundscapes and voices speaking on a different theme in each episode. In this first episode, the subject is music. The first popular music we remember hearing. How and when we became music fans, and how our passion for music has changed over time. If you enjoy what you are about to hear, please subscribe, comment, and share it with the people you love. Feedback would be very much appreciated. And now, We Muse Aloud, Episode 1. Music Appreciation.
My parents listened to... There was Fleetwood Mac. There was a lot of Fleetwood Mac that they listened to. I remember that pretty well. Graham Parsons was in there as well. The Come On People Now, Smile on Your Brother. My brother and I used to turn and we would smile on each other. We would lean in and make a big smile. And we thought that was a good joke because it was a pretty good joke. My dad really liked Jimmy Buffett, which was hilarious to me because Jimmy Buffett's terrible. But I recently had a conversation with a friend from England who was like, no one knows Jimmy Buffett in England, and Jimmy Buffett's kind of badass because he only sings about loose women running from the law and drinking, and he does it in this Caribbean style. And I was like, that's not a bad point actually, but Jimmy Buffett's still terrible.
My mother always listened to Cher, and my dad was really into Supertramp, just a ton of Supertramp. And I remember a lot of Roxette too. Yeah, Joyride was definitely a large part of my childhood.
When I think back to growing up, I remember my parents playing a lot of John Denver. John Denver was big in our house. My mom really loved Country Roads, and we listened to, we had a lot of John Denver on vinyl. And I also remember a lot of Beatles. We had a lot of Sgt. Pepper was a constant in the house from a certain age. And I remember the radio being on a lot. I remember my mother actually getting really excited every time Stars on 45 would come on because it was the Beatles medley. She thought it was really fun, so she enjoyed that. And ABBA too. There was a lot of ABBA in the house when I was a kid. Those are the ones that stick out the most for me that my parents would
I remember my mom would listen to Bob Dylan, which hugely influential for me. I will be a Dylan fan till death do us part. And by that I mean me and Bob Dylan, I guess. And my dad is lame, much lamer. My mom loved the Beatles and Dylan, she loved that kind of stuff. My dad, I don't think really understands music. I think he just likes to feel things. So he loves Pavarotti, but I don't think he understands the complexities of Pavarotti's voice and the music, or Nessun Dorma. I couldn't tell you, I remember every Christmas hearing that fucking David Bowie and Bing Crosby Little Drummer Boy, which was weird. For example, so my dad really liked Pavarotti, and then this Christmas all he wanted me to get him was the new Adele album.
Well, there's a certain amount of of that kind of era of music and a lot of Cher's songs that I know, or ABBA, Roxette. I can sing all of Roxette, kind of know it all by osmosis, so it has this nice nostalgia to it. But I guess mostly it was my grandmother's music that kind of really stuck with me. She had a piano, and she was very into musical theater / jazz, kind of that sort of thing. So she would always play the piano and we would sing together. And for some reason, I loved the idea of the piano so much. It was this magical thing. And she taught me how to play just little songs on it by drawing in pencil on the white keys what the letters were, and she would tell me what letters to say. So a lot of Judy Garland, a lot of Ella Fitzgerald, and those are the things that I really hold to these days.
I would say, in terms of the music that they played that I ended up liking, I think I ended up liking all of it. I still actually have a John Denver Greatest Hits album, or a CD, and I also remember riding the bus in high school with a cassette that my dad had made that was John Denver's Greatest Hits, so I would play that a lot. And ABBA was something that I didn't listen to very much until later on. Like later on, I definitely, you know, especially because they became more. They had. It feels like they were initially dismissed when we were younger, and then as we got older, ABBA became like kind of a cool, kitschy thing to like. So I was, and especially because Elvis Costello would talk about how much ABBA influenced armed forces, and I would go back and listen to some of those songs and the little piano arpeggios that then Steve Naive does on, you know, Oliver's Army and different songs from that record. And of course, I mean, the Beatles are an evergreen. The Beatles, you know, I mean, everyone. I think I'd be crazy not to like the Beatles.
I had an ex-girlfriend who like dedicated a Coldplay song to me called the song Green Eyes. He had written it for Gwyneth Paltrow, so I'm sure it means something different for him now. But so, you know, I hear like I remember like shortly after we broke up, I hate that fucking song and I hate Coldplay, but I heard that song in a grocery store and I got a little teary-eyed because of what it meant at that time.
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely like different types of music. I also played in band, like in instrumental band when I was all through school. So I do have like a love for like classical orchestral music. My best friend growing up also played the fiddle with her sisters. So I do have like a Celtic. Sometimes I crave some Celtic music. Then there's the whole musical theater jazz thing. But I guess an album that I always go back to is Joni Mitchell's Blue. So, yeah, I'd say there's a wide variety.
Very difficult time listening to the grunge era. I have a very hard. Every time I put on something, an old record from the early '90s, I end up wincing a lot. I have a really tough time with. I used to like the Smashing Pumpkins a lot, and I can't even listen to them anymore. And I actually can't even listen to Nirvana really at all. I have a tough. I don't. Nevermind is not a record that I pull out ever. And I thought that would be at the time. I figured this would be like a new classic that I would either be like. It would be like our generation's Nevermind the Bollocks, and I play this all the time. All that stuff like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. I just honestly find it I find it kind of embarrassing and grating now. I can't do it.
I think my passion for music ebbs and flows with whatever emotional state I might be in. I think like music is there for me in harder times, and I feel like I go to music less when I'm like happy, which is weird.
The music that I used to love that's difficult to listen to now is AFI. AFI were like the most important band in the world to me, and it's laughable how bad they've become. They're bad to the point where it's ruined their back catalog to me. And mostly because it's just like they went from being this like horror punk band with like goth rock undertones and very emotional and deep and driven to like trying to sound like the Deftones. And I don't want to listen to the Deftones. Like, I think the Deftones are terrible. But when you've established a sound and you've established your thing, and then you change it so dramatically to fit with whatever the time period is doing, it's just terrible. And like, they could have been something bigger than what they were, and they could have been much more important than what they were, and what they are now just makes me cringe.
I think in terms of time in my life when I was the most passionate about music, I believe it comes and goes in waves. I think I will say this though, I know for a fact that the time in my life when I was least passionate about music was when I was writing about music. Writing about music was a real buzzkill for me. And think because I was writing about music from 1995 until about 1998, and I feel like that was it gradually became kind of a low point for music. I think there were definitely records that I liked a lot at that point, but I felt like I wasn't as excited about the music, and I feel like I wasn't really able to explore the music as a listener before I had to digest it and have an opinion about it so quickly that I look back on certain records that I liked. Like if I come across an old magazine that I wrote for and I read a review, I'll often be embarrassed either because I overpraised the record or I dismissed it unnecessarily. Like I think when I did an interview with Radiohead when the Bends came out, and I basically at that point listened to the record like maybe twice, maybe 3 times before I had to sit down with the band. And whereas if I'd been able to talk to them a year later, I would have had a lot more to say, a lot more to talk about, but that's not realistic. I mean, it's not gonna work.
I don't know why. Lately, I've been just in a mood where I'm like, pop music is fine. Like, I'm like, hey, that Justin Bieber song is on. I like that little trumpet noise. That's great. I like that. I'm not blown away by it. It's pretty dumb, but I'll listen to it. Whatever.
To one of their albums, maybe, but it's also one of those things where I know all the lyrics, and I used to think those lyrics were amazing, and those lyrics are not good. It's bad poetry. Murderous filigree is one of the lines. Let's admire the pattern forming murderous filigree. Murderous filigree doesn't mean anything. Filigree, as far as I understand, is like ironworking. And that murderous filigree is not a thing. It's not a metaphor. It's not poetry. It's just words that kind of sounded cool together. And I'm like, that guy wrote that when he was 25.
The time where I would really listen to a lot of Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, which is very funny. My brother and I would get home from school, and my dad had this big stereo system that we weren't supposed to touch, but we would crank Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and a lot of CCR, and it just doesn't. I feel like I out-listened it, I guess. I just listened to it too much.
Yeah, I would say in high school there was definitely a passion about music that I don't have now. But I think there's a passion about everything when you're in high school, when you're a teenager, that you don't necessarily carry forward because your head gets more full of work and relationships and other commitments.
I think that there's also music that I recognize was very much of a time period in my life, and it doesn't mean that I can't listen to it anymore, or it doesn't mean that I don't like it, but it's representative of a period of my life, or a relationship that I had, or a aspect of my personality that I don't relate to in the same way anymore.
I don't really feel the need to wear band t-shirts anymore. I can't even remember when I stopped doing that, to be honest.
It's funny because music is kind of my job in some ways too. Like, I write about music a lot, and I think there's periods in my life where I've gone to more shows, and there's periods of my life where I've taken a backseat and tried to really dig in. But I think that what has happened is kind of that I've started to know the stuff I know very, very, very well because of old passions with it. I wouldn't say that I'm more passionate now or less passionate now, but there's a depth to it now that I don't think I had before, just based off of years and years of listening. But I think when music mattered to me the most was probably, I think just as I was entering university for the first time, where going to shows and listening to bands kind of became my gateway into this new world, because I was leaving home for the first time, and nobody knew me from a hole in the wall. Like, I got to shape my whole persona all over again. And so I got to take a look and see, what I liked about myself and what I didn't like about myself, and pick and choose the things I liked and go forward with that. And I think the soundtracks to those things were instrumental to those decisions. So